Welcome back to the Chad Hasty Show on News Talk 95.1 FM and 790 AM KFYO. A lot to get into. We start off by going to the phones. Our next guest. Normally he will join us on Mondays, but, I wasn't here yesterday, and, he gets to join us today. Our good friend Scott Braddock, editor of Quorum Report, on the phones with us today. Scott, good morning. How are you today?
Chad, I'm doing well. How are you?
Doing well. Did you have a good Thanksgiving?
I did. I was in Arkansas, in Fort Smith, where my mother lives, and then after that I headed back down to the Houston area and was on Galveston Island over the weekend, which, I don't know about you, but the only time to go to the beach is not just during the summer. I like going down there when nobody's there.
Yes.
The hotel room rates are, about $100 a night, and you can chill there on the beach. And even though it's 65 degrees, you can still look out at the water.
Yeah, that's not bad.
Nothing wrong with that.
No, you can still, and maybe put on a light jacket, smoke a cigar, have a beer, and you're still good.
That might have happened.
Yeah, that's not possible. A bad day. That's not
let me write all that down.
Not a bad day at all. It's been a while since we've talked to you, and a little bit has happened in that time. I want to go way back when, 2 weeks ago, I guess, or a week ago. It seems like 2-3 weeks, but that's politics for you. The leakage that happened from the Texas Republican Party. The battle plans for 2020, or at least a draft of a battle plan, was leaked to the Democrats, which doesn't always happen. And the story's kind of died off, Scott. Is this a pause for concern for the Republicans, or is there maybe this kind of was overblown?
Well, if you don't mind, let's back up and say exactly what happened here. It's a memo that was a draft prepared by RPT, Republican Party of Texas staff, that the chairman, James Dickey, told us was just for discussion. It's not a final battle plan or anything like that. It's just some points they wanted to go over in their internal discussions. The mainstream media seemed to be focused on the idea that the Republican Party was going to set up phony websites to attack, and when I say phony, what I mean is they would, sort of commandeer the names of different candidates, like James Tallarico, for example, is a Democratic state representative. And, they might buy the website domain, something like TallaricoForTexas.com, and then put a bunch of negative stuff about him on there. Now,
happens all the time.
That happens all the time. That's the thing, is that's not new. I hadn't seen anything in there as far as tactics that were new. I thought that what was interesting about this document, and by the way, I have it on good authority that what happened was some RPT staff had drafted this document, and then it was forwarded directly. One person emailed it to another Republican staffer, and then somebody turned right around and forwarded that to the personal email addresses of several of the Democrats who are targeted by this plan. Now, that in and of itself is interesting, and that had a debate going here in Austin about whether this is really some sort of a mistake, or did somebody do this on purpose for the specific reason of having it in the news. That could very well be. I mean, that'd be old school politics, that sort of rope-a-dope kind of thing. Yeah. Here's what we're planning to do to y'all, that sort of thing. And one of the things that was interesting in that document is that the budget that they laid out for how much they were going to spend on this, I think it was about $140,000 across the state. That's not very much, especially when the RPT has about $3 million on hand.
Yeah.
And part of what they're supposed to do, as the chairman has laid out many times, is back up Republican candidates in their election. So you would think that whatever they were going to put out there would be, more substantial than that as far as how much money they were going to spend. But one of the things in the document that was interesting, Chad, is an acknowledgement that President Trump is a problem for certain Republican candidates. Now, I don't think that's a shocker to you and me, but how many Republican officials have you heard say that out loud, in public?
I was about to say, on tape?
On tape, it happened on tape one time, and remember, that guy had to say he wasn't going to run for re-election, the speaker, Dennis Bonnen. But otherwise, it's a question that Republicans tend to kind of dance around, but we've talked about it many times here on the show. Two things can be true at once, right? One is that President Trump can probably win Texas, and probably win it about like he did last time around, by 9 points or so. I know that his campaign would like to do better than that. But the other thing that's true is that for some Republicans, particularly those in the suburbs, which we've talked about many times here, he presents a specific problem, especially when you have suburban Republican women who are more and more turned off by the president and could cost them their elections in those suburban districts while statewide Republicans would still do okay.
Yeah. And, Scott, it seems as though there are Republicans that are just fine talking about this behind closed doors.
Yes.
And in secret, super secret drafts, but they're not okay talking about this in public.
Yeah, it's a deal where you don't want to draw the president's ire.
No,
no matter who you are. If you say that the president is a challenge for Republican candidates, and that gets to the president, he has not had kind words for anybody who had said that. He says he's no problem. And by the way, there are folks within the Republican Party who would say that, look, the president doesn't cause a problem for any of these people. If they lose, it's because of them and them not running their campaigns the way they ought to. The flip side, of course, is that, as we saw in Kentucky, for example, where the president went to campaign for the gubernatorial candidate there. I saw the same thing in Louisiana, by the way. It seemed like the president was setting it up where he wanted to take credit if the guy was going to win, but when his Republican lost, it's their fault.
Let's see. I think it's interesting. I think that there are more Republicans, and are they right? Are they not right? I think time will tell. But there are more Republicans in the upper echelon, if you will, of the Republican Party in Texas who feel that way, but they don't want to say it. They can't say it.
Yeah, it's not something let's put it this way. They certainly don't want to be saying it now. No. When we still have the filing period going on, and for specific candidates, if they were to go around and say, look, the president, maybe I don't agree with him on everything, maybe I think he's wrong about this or that, that is exactly the kind of thing that would get somebody to file against them, and then that would be the thing they used against them in their primary campaign, that this person is against the president.
Yeah. Speaking of the filing period wraps up in what, Scott, about a week. Out here, we've got Representative Burrows, who I think a couple of weeks ago filed for reelection. Representative Frullo yesterday filed for reelection. Not shockers there. What are you looking at as filing period starts to wind down?
There are, and it ends next Monday, by the way, December 9th, and we do have a full month of filing in Texas, so people have quite some time to think about whether they want to put their name on the ballot. I can tell you, Chad, it's always pretty funny, listening to folks talk about running for office, and then that maybe they lose their nerve, and there's probably people throwing up over a toilet. They're so nervous about whether they're going to go for it or not. And look, running for office is a huge decision. Put it in perspective. Your whole family is going to be scrutinized. It takes a lot of money to run. It turns into another full-time job, and of course, if you're running for office in Texas, for state rep or state senator in particular, you still have to keep your other job going too, whatever your real job is. So it's basically like having two full-time jobs plus your family obligations and all of that. So I don't think anybody should be criticized too harshly if they decide they don't want to do it, although there is the danger of somebody making a lot of noise and then not doing it, right? Then you look like you've chickened out. But as far as any surprises, I don't see any. It is kind of funny to me. Look at Senator John Cornyn's emails about the Beto Watch. Have you seen those? Where
I have, yes.
You've got the chance for O'Rourke to get in. And as you mentioned in one of our email exchanges early this morning, there is some polling from a Beto O'Rourke supporting group that shows that O'Rourke, if he was to get into the race, and his deadline, by the way, is the same as it is for everybody else, December 9th. If he was to get into the race, he would clear the field pretty quickly. On the Democratic side, I think, and I know where you're at on this, Chad. I think you and I kind of both agree. Beto's probably not going to run. Doesn't look that way. He's sort of made some noise and had some events where, supporter appreciation events and things like that had people talking. But I think the reality is, for the Democrats, at this point, it doesn't really matter because the Senate race is not the top of the ticket. The presidential race is the top of the ticket. And I think it really depends, as far as how Democrats do in this state, it's going to depend more on who the presidential nominee is on the Democratic side versus who the Senate candidate is. And if you look at the Senate candidates who are running right now, against Cornyn. I think, how many do we have, 6 or 7? There's a whole bunch of them. As you pointed out many times, nobody knows who any of them are, but I guess it doesn't matter. If you look at who they are and the way they're running their campaigns, I don't think any of them do too much damage to the Democratic side. They're probably all safe choices, no matter which one emerges. And in some ways, as you pointed out, Beto could do more damage because of some of the very liberal positions he took when he was running for the White House.
Visiting with Scott Braddock, editor, Quorum Report. I want to go back to something you said. It matters who is on the top of the ticket for the Democrats. It seems to me there about a week or two ago, maybe, Senator Cruz had tweeted out this idea that if Elizabeth Warren gets the nomination, there's two schools of thinking. That if someone like Elizabeth Warren gets the nomination, there's no way she wins Texas because she's too far to the left. Cruz kind of tamped that down a little bit and said, well, wait a minute. If someone like Elizabeth Warren gets the nomination, then you may have everybody on the left who gets out. You get the far left, the moderate left, and the in-between left. They all come out for Elizabeth Warren. What are your thoughts on something like that? Does Elizabeth Warren, is she more polarizing in Texas than, let's say, a Joe Biden?
I don't think so. I think that the president is the constant here. The left, the far left, the middle of the sort of middle of the road Democrats, all of them are so opposed to President Trump that he is a motivator in a way that none of the people are either capable of being or whatever on the Democratic side. They're going to come out to vote against Trump. I mean, that's what this reelection is for him is going to be all about. And I think the real question is, does the person who's running as the Democrat have the ability to also inspire those Democrats who come out to vote? Will they also punish Republicans down the ballot? And that's where we're about to have a big test in Texas because we don't have one-punch straight ticket voting anymore. And so if they don't have a concerted effort on the Democratic side to get people to vote Democratic all the way down the ballot, it may not matter for the rest of the field. I still think the president's going to win in Texas, no matter who the Democrat is.
Yeah. Let's get to something that's a little bit outside of what most people would look at with politics, and that is some news about STAR testing.
Yeah, interesting. There have been a lot of complaints, of course, as you know, about the standardized tests in Texas.
Oh, yeah.
One thing that I'm sure that all you have to do is talk about the STAR or whatever the latest iteration is of standardized testing in Texas. That was always an easy talk show topic to get people calling in and complaining. This specific complaint has to do with whether or not the test is readable, whether or not they're putting things in front of the students that are outside of their reading level, and that's why they maybe don't do so well. But the researchers at the University of Texas at Austin, they did the study. We have all the results at quorumreport.com that show that no, actually, the readability of the test, and by the way, this doesn't have to do with the difficulty of the questions, just whether or not the students can read it and understand it. And these researchers found that those students certainly are able to understand it. So if they're getting the questions wrong on that test, it's not because they weren't able to read the questions. It's sort of a fascinating deal. But let me tell you something. As you said, it's a tough deal. The standardized tests in Texas, every state lawmaker, whether they're Republican, Democrat, whether they would consider themselves conservative, moderate, liberal, whatever, they have all heard from parents basically a quote like this: the kids have to take too many damn tests. And so, of course, they're always trying to figure out a way to make this better. Lawmakers had asked for this study to be done, and apparently they're going to come out with 2 iterations of this. They put out the initial study yesterday, and we'll be waiting to see what the follow-up is. Very good. Scott, tell folks what they can find at Quorum Report this week. Well, the State Senate Finance Committee getting together this week. They're going to start, the hard work of trying to figure out where we're going in this state as far as the budget, which, of course, is always the Herculean effort to put together that $250 billion document, which, think about it, Chad. They don't really write it and vote on it until 2021. They start looking at those questions now. It's December of 2019. So we'll be delving into some of that stuff. Plus, we'll be keeping an eye on who files for some of these elections. As you said, we've only got till Monday to find out who really has the guts to go for it. We'll keep track of all of it for you at quorumreport.com.
Very good, Scott. We'll visit with you next week, my friend.
Thanks, Chad.
That's Scott Braddock, editor, Quorum Report.